You there, Ed?
Hello, Ed.
Hello?
Is this Ed?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Hey, my name's Chris. I had a...
You're,
Chris.
You're not
Hi.
Ed.
Hi.
No, I'm someone else. Is that okay?
No, that's great, yeah.
Sure.
I wasn't sure if I was going to get on or not, but this is the first time I've called. I just recently found you guys on the internet, and I think you guys are doing an awesome job. And I know you had talked about not calling and agreeing, although I do agree with you. I thought maybe I'd argue for a friend of mine.
Sure.
I don't believe you.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
Give him a shot.
Go ahead.
Come on.
All right.
Be a sport.
Okay, well, basically, a good friend of mine who was the guy who originally, I guess you could say, converted me or helped me find Christ, back in, 2001 after 9/11, him and I have stayed in contact ever since then, and I've gone through somewhat of like a teeter-tottering period since then, and I read The God Delusion about 2 or 3 months ago, and then along with that, some stuff about myths in the Bible, and I've pretty much come to an agreement with the tenets of atheism. But what he would
Except there aren't
argue,
any, but
No.
well,
You know what he means, generally.
I got you.
What he would argue is, first of all, he's an old Earth creationist, where he stands, but he believes that Genesis is kind of an anthropomorphic telling, but Genesis 2, he believes that Adam and Eve were real people, and that he walked with people walked with dinosaurs, which makes it kind of difficult for me to talk with him because I see some conflicts there. The method in which scientists use to date fossils, he says, is wrong for the most part.
And what can he bring to bear to support that?
He's not an old Earth creationist then.
Yeah.
If he thinks men walked with dinosaurs and that radiocarbon dating is wrong and fossil dating is wrong, basically he's a young Earth creationist who just doesn't want to say the Earth's only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. He wants to have his cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point that I'm trying to make to him. He says that the old Earth, it's an old Earth, old universe based upon good reason, evidence that, points that direction, mostly that have to do with the Big Bang. But then he wants to stick to the idea that Adam and Eve were real people, and that Genesis 2 is literal, based upon the idea that we need the teaching of the fall in order to explain evil.
Well, then he's just wrong about everything,
Yeah,
quite frankly. We don't need the teaching of the fall to explain evil.
He's
We
picking
don't-
and choosing.
Yeah, he is simply believing what he wants to believe and making excuses rather than presenting actual evidence for that. And you're essentially dealing with someone who has an irrational set of beliefs. So of course you're going to have a great deal of difficulty trying to have
So
reasonable
how would I go
discussions with him.
about pointing that out to him without...
Get him to defend his side of things. If he thinks that the means that scientists use to date, for example, fossils and other archaeological and paleontological evidence is wrong, get him to display his expertise on that. Say, okay, first off, what means are they using that you think are wrong, and why are they wrong? Why is radioisotope dating wrong? Why is nuclear dating wrong? Show me, go right down into the physics of it, and show how it is that we cannot use these methods to determine the age of an artifact.
I'd also ask him...
Get him to defend his position, because he's the guy who's wrong. You don't have to defend anything.
I'd also ask him what justification he has to ignore Genesis 1 and then take Genesis 2 literally.
Yeah.
And I did talk to him about that. He uses some... I don't know if you've heard of Meredith Klein, but Meredith Klein describes different things that go on in the Old Testament as basically different perversions of the truth, like different pagan myths and so on and so forth. And he uses that same argument when it comes down to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, where Genesis 1 is anthropomorphic, but Genesis 2 is literal because
he wants it to be. And
right, exactly, because he feels he needs it to be.
Yeah. The Bible is the big book of multiple choice. Just remember that. Anytime you're dealing with an apologist, they will pick and choose the bits of it that they think will validate their arguments, and the other bits of it that you point to them and say, well, what about this? They're like, oh, well, that's... for example, you know how whenever you bring up anything sort of reprehensible about the Bible, and Christians will always say, oh, well, that's just Old Testament. Jesus came along and gave us a new covenant, so all that Old Testament stuff doesn't matter anymore. That's just the Old Testament. But we still want the Ten Commandments in schools.
Right.
So, the Old Testament matters when it matters, and when it doesn't matter, or when it can shown to be really stupid and reprehensible, then suddenly, oh, well, that's just the Old Testament. So remember
Well,
that. Bible's the big book of multiple choice.
That's something I try to point out to him that, the reason why I like talking to him so much is because he's not a stupid Christian. Right now he's in school and seminary and everything else. And so I take his, what he has to say seriously because he takes, the truth serious too. But I guess one of the other problems that I have with when I'm pointing out the fact that not just the Old Testament but the New Testament, the Bible in general, isn't a very good code of morals because of the atrocities and genocide and et cetera, he will say that the atrocities are divine judgments and therefore are morally just. And I'm not sure how to explain to him that basically if you wouldn't hold to them as being moral, how can you say that God is moral into doing it? His simple response to me is that God is perfect and we're not. I'm not sure how to get around that.
So again, he retreats into his unknowable God once you back him into the corner with a question that he can't answer.
You asked a good question, which was, if a man were to do the things that you attribute to your God, we would consider it immoral. So why is it then moral when your God does it? And if his answer is that God's perfect, then it is in fact moral even when a human does it. God doesn't get a special. If he's claiming that it's perfect and perfect morality, then slavery is perfectly moral, no matter who does it. It's not that God's a special case.
Well, gang rape is perfectly moral. Murdering children is perfectly moral. God does all these things in the Old Testament.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you point those things out, it's like, oh, well, that's just the Old Testament.
The funny thing about him, too, and especially when it comes to the dating deal, is right now his story to me is he wants to go into archaeology after he's finished with schooling in order to be a Christian in a field where there's not so many Christians.
Yeah.
Because...
And I just find it interesting. I'm pretty convinced that he either won't go into archaeology or won't remain a Christian, or at least maybe deist. I don't know. But one of the other things that I've been trying to talk to him about are just the different ideas of like string theory and M theory and different possibilities like the accordion universe. To basically,
I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't waste a single breath on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't even. Not even if it gives some pseudo answer that might sound appealing to somebody who's frustrated with not having a better answer than Magic Man done it. Don't waste a minute on it. His beliefs are either true or they're not, and they actually have evidence to support them, or they don't.
The reason why I thought it would be a good way to talk about it is because he's claiming that I believe that the world or the universe came into existence out of nothing, and I've been trying to explain to him that that's not my position, that I would hold that matter and energy can either be created or destroyed. I would actually lump life into there also, and that whether we know where it came from or we don't know where it came from, it doesn't change the fact that that law is a law, and that he's the one that's trying to say that everything came out of nothing, and I'm not sure if I'm getting anywhere.
He may not be. He may not be. There's a number of different ways to look at Genesis, and one of them has to do with digging down into the language and saying, well, it doesn't say God created from nothing. It says the earth was without form and void, and then God formed it. So they have some sort of apologetic that's still consistent with their text, where God didn't create out of nothing. As a matter of fact, creation ex nihilo has been rejected since Augustine and earlier. It's only a small portion that actually go that route. And that's how they end up twisting this to be consistent with like Big Bang cosmology. It's silly. Basically, they had a whole bunch of beliefs that were accepted as literal on the face, this is the way God done it. And then as science comes in and says, ooh, that doesn't make sense, they say, well, okay, but this part's still right. Oh, well, that's not it. Well, this part's still right. And as we start poking holes in it, they basically say, okay, well, that chapter is just a metaphor. It's just an allegory. It's basically the purpose is to tell you not how it was done, but that God's the one who done it. And they keep going that. Well, eventually what they've done, and what they'll continue to do, is making their God smaller and smaller and more vague as human understanding continues to increase through the reliable scientific method. Yeah. The only way that we know of to get to actual reliable understanding about reality. And eventually they're going to get to a point where they have a God that is as 50% gray as possible.
Well, the point is that we are always going to have, simply because of the nature of it, gaps in our knowledge, scientific
Right.
knowledge.
That's
And
the
religion
difference
actually
between
loves that.
dogma and
Religion,
science.
as Dawkins pointed out in his book, religion loves those gaps because as long as those gaps exist, and they always will, well, those are the gaps that you hide your God in. And
One other thing I wanted to ask about.
Okay, one more, and then we got more callers.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
It's just more on a personal level. Ever since I've found the different teachings of atheism, basically a lot of friends of mine, people who would consider themselves Christians but maybe loose-ended Christians, have basically thought that I've just gone insane. And the reason why I have a problem with this is because I find it, like as Dawkins points out, it's a form of child abuse, and the idea of the irrational, something that is okay within religion, we should respect it. I would agree with him that that's just ridiculous, and it's kind of been a personal thing for me. And how do I deal with the fact that my family members think that I've lost my mind, and people I work with don't even want to talk to me, and people don't want to go to the bar with me and have a drink because I can't talk about anything else, it seems like.
Well,
I don't know, like, did you guys ever feel the same way, or is it just...
I got a TV show. I can talk about it as much as I want.
I guess that's true.
I don't really care if people get pissed off or don't want to have a drink with me. More people want to drink with me now because of the show than before. That's it's first of all, just quick anal retentive corrections. There are no tenets of atheism. There are no teachings of atheism. Atheism isn't an ism. It's a rejection of a position. Everything else is extra. Atheists don't necessarily agree on anything besides that they don't believe that a God exists. So these various things that you're kind of ascribing that have become who you are, and they're not necessarily atheists. They're consistent with atheism, but they aren't derived from atheism because there's nothing to derive from.
Okay.
But with regard to dealing with people, find an atheist group and use that as the outlet to have the type of discussions that other people don't necessarily want to have with you, but be willing to be out and open and honest and have discussions with the people who don't want to go drink with you if that's all you're going to talk about.
Yeah, just like we told the earlier caller who has the same, more or less the same thing. Just, you be the person who's willing to bridge that gap. Right now, they're responding to you because, let's face it, Christianity and religion in general, but Christianity is selling an inferior product. And I think a lot of believers, if you back them up against the court, they know this. And to be faced with someone who just rejects the thing entirely, just said, look, I just don't believe. I'm not any different of a person. I just don't believe in any of this stuff. But look at you. You're not threatening. You're not someone who presents any sort of a challenge to them in any kind of direct way in terms of the way they choose to live their lives.
Curious.
So they're dealing with a lot of confusion right now, and so the way they deal with that confusion is to just sort of retreat. It's there's a lot of fear that's kind of built into the belief process, and they have to sort of overcome that on their own. But you just keep being you,
Right. Well, thank you guys.
Sure.
I appreciate you pointing out the fact. I mean, I'm just now trying to understand all these different things. So.
Hey, we're happy to help.
Don't ever stop trying to understand. Thanks a lot for calling, Chris.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.